Welcome internet to Mayfair, which if you're a fan of Monopoly you'll know is the really quite posh part of London. The perfect place then for a Ferrari dealership. A bit like this one, a shiny new H.R. Owen showroom, and we're here because behind that window is something really quite exciting. Can you guess what it is yet? Come on, let's have a look. In fact, this dealership was only opened last night, with none other than Charles Leclerc cutting the ribbon. But they've managed to clear away the champagne glasses and £50 notes to accommodate us taking a look around the SF90 Stradale. Don't forget, this is the first time an SF90 has ever been seen in public. Its reveal a few weeks ago was a closed event with no cameras allowed. This is what we've come to see, the brand new Ferrari SF90 Stradale, the latest, greatest mid-engined V8 Ferrari supercar. But this one is a hybrid, the first ever series production hybrid V8 mid-engine supercar from Ferrari ever. And get this, it's got 1,000 horsepower or 986 brake horsepower in old money, which is quite a lot, isn't it? The same amount of power roughly as you got with the LaFerrari, the McLaren P1, the Porsche 918 Spider. So it's actually more of a hypercar than a supercar. But let's get into the techie stuff later. First of all, let's have a good old nose around it. Have a look at how this thing has been styled. Because the first thing I'll say is, compared to the pictures, it's a lot more dramatic in person. It's lower, it's wider, it's got that incredible presence that all Ferraris have. The other trick that it pulls off, that Ferrari does very well, is removing pieces of the bodywork in order to make the aerodynamics work, rather than sticking on spoilers at the back, splitters at the front. It makes the whole thing more sculptural. Come around the side, look at it in profile. A couple of things to notice. The first is that the cabin is slightly further forward than you normally get with the mid-engine Ferraris. The overhangs slightly shorter, the rear end, the tail, slightly higher. That's all in the name of aero, of course. Speaking of which, we can work our way down the car. The S-Duct, or a version of the S-Duct that we first saw on Formula One, but also featured on the 488 Pista and now the F8 Tributo. Basically, air comes in here, up here along the bonnet and pushes the front of the car down into the road. The headlights look pretty cool, don't they? But there was also an intake there, a slit that feeds cool air into the brakes. Everything has a function. Come along the side, there's more. These huge intakes here for the cooling system, but also for the engine. And round the back, a pretty trick rear spoiler. So, as you can see, it's fixed. In normal operation, the air flows under here and out here, but when you're braking or in corners or you want that little bit of extra downforce, this separate section here tilts and stalls the airflow, a bit like a gurney flap, adds the extra downforce. I'm told there's 380 kilograms of downforce at 155 miles an hour. When you consider this car weighs about 1,650 kilograms, that's a pretty handy figure for a car that looks as slippery as this. Inside, Ferrari has gone all out, replacing randomly scattered buttons with screens. So the new instrument pod is a 16-inch piece of curved glass. There's touch pads on the steering wheel and you get a head-up display. Order the Assetto Fiorano pack that saves 30 kilograms, which, let's face it, everyone will. And you get carbon fibre door panels, as well as titanium springs and track-focused tyres. All right, so here we are inside the SF90 Stradale's interior, and I have to say, it is quite odd to not be faced with the massive confusing buttons like you normally get inside a Ferrari. It's all super sleek, super clean, all touch screens basically, including the engine start-stop button right here in the middle. You still got the quirky indicators up here in the middle of the wheel. But yeah, cleaner, sleeker. Whether it all works or not, we'll have to find out when we actually drive it. But by far, the coolest bit about the SF90's interior is down here. It's the gear selector, which has been designed to look like a miniature version of the old open gate click-clack manual from Ferraris of old. And that's just brilliant. Driving modes, we should talk about those. Yes, you've got your Manettino switch here on the wheel. There's 4 modes, the first of which is e-drive. On that, you can do 15 miles on electric power alone, at which point, this is a front-wheel drive Ferrari. Sacrilege, I know. The next one is a hybrid mode that turns the engine on and off to try and balance performance and economy. The next one is a performance mode that keeps the engine on but makes sure the battery doesn't deplete beyond a certain level. And finally, you've got qualify mode, which basically is your balls out, one lap, maximum performance, give it everything, forget the battery charge, we want maximum performance. The last thing to mention is your feet. Your feet sit 15 millimeters higher than they do in a normal Ferrari. It's something to do with clever underbody aero that I don't really understand. But the point is, you're a bit more reclined, you're a bit more laid back, a bit more like a race car. Just lets you know you're in something very serious indeed. Because you are. The twin-turbo V8 is a development of the Pista and F8 Tributo's engine, bored out to 4 litres and producing 780 horsepower. The rest comes from 3 electric motors, 1 on the crank and 2 on the front axle, 1 controlling each wheel for full torque vectoring magic. 0 to 62 takes 2.5 seconds, 0 to 124 6.7, that's only 2/10 behind the Bugatti Chiron, and the top speed is 212 miles an hour. Oh, and it will lap Fiorano faster than any road legal Ferrari before it, in 1 minute 19 seconds. Interesting, isn't it, that while the LaFerrari was resolutely rear-wheel drive and definitely didn't have an electric-only mode, this layout is a lot more like the Porsche 918 Spider. Now, the Porsche was kind of seen as the dumpy, overcomplicated one of the holy hypercar trinity, but Ferrari appears to have come around to Stuttgart's way of thinking that some EV range and 4-wheel drive is probably the way to go. And then we get to the price, somewhere around 400 grand we're told. Now, I know it's ridiculous to say this, but when you consider performances in the ballpark of Koenigsegg's, AMG ones and the Aston Martin Valhalla, all multi-million pound unobtainium, it's actually, dare I say it, rather good value. Whew. Time to get a bit of air, I think. And maybe talk about something that Chris Harris mentioned the other day. I was talking to him about Ferraris and specifically the power output of this car here, and he called it
a rabbit hole of nonsense.
I think I might know what he's talking about. When I drove the 488 Pista, I loved it. It's rampant, it's rabid acceleration, wants to go sideways everywhere, but I love it because it's exciting at any speeds and in all sorts of situations. But I didn't think, do you know what? That car needs another 290 horsepower. But that's what this thing has. But here's the thing, it's also got 4-wheel drive, so it won't be quite as keen to kick sideways. Traction off the line is going to be absolutely immense. It's going to be really hard for Ferrari to integrate the engine with those motors and get the whole thing working in harmony, but they are the masters of electronics. So, dare I say it, this could be a 1,000 horsepower car that's easy to drive. Can't actually believe I've just said that. Anyway, I need to lie down after all this excitement, so see you later. Taxi!